So we're going to be interviewing Scott Taylor. He's a Bigfoot investigator, and he's taken by far more reports than anybody that I know of. We've had him on a couple of previous videos where he went over other people's encounters, and today he's going to be going over his personal experiences.
I moved out here to the western part of Mason County in 2020 when the whole COVID thing hit, and I kind of wanted to get out this way because it's not too far from where I had my first encounter, which is just west of here, about 10 miles as a crow flies. It was up in the Wynoochee Valley. That was in October of 2005, and I was deer hunting and done for the day. It was still a little bit light and starting to make the trek back to the gate where the vehicle was parked, and something was following us. We didn't know it at the time until we ran into a wall of stink, and if you've ever smelled that Sasquatch stink, it's pretty remarkable and you'll never forget it. You can even just think about it and it comes back. But couldn't see anything when that happened, so we kept on walking, and we had to make a left-hand turn to cross a creek, and it had been following us on the left side, and it politely waited for us to cross the culvert there and on the road, and but the gal I was with, girlfriend at the time, she looked down in the kind of the gloomy, twilighty dark down there and said, "What the blank is that?" And I just, was passing it off as being a maybe a bear or something like that. So I, just nonchalantly said, "Yeah, it's probably a bear. Let's just keep on going." And we walked maybe another 200 yards, kind of went just around a bend a little bit out of sight of that location. And it had by then stepped up onto the road and it started to vocalize. And with the first vocalization, it was hugely loud, extremely loud. And I stopped and told her to shush because she was talking. And then it vocalized 3 more times. And in the time it was vocalizing, I was going through the list in my head of what animals make that kind of a sound, and there was none. So suddenly it hit me, that stink and that sound, it can only be a Sasquatch. And so I showed quite a bit of alarm at that time, and it was it kind of freaked her out then too. So we hot-footed it out of there as quick as we could. I went home and went online and started looking for vocalizations from what people thought were Sasquatches, and on the BFRO website I did find a match. It was a different song but the same voice, and so then the next Monday morning I'm in at work telling everybody I knew that I had a Bigfoot encounter, and I became the Bigfoot guy at where I worked after that. But it was funny, over the next few days, a half a dozen coworkers came up privately and said, "Let me tell you about what happened to me." And they had all had encounters of one kind or another, including, just plain old eyeball sightings. So that was my first encounter, and that's what got me really interested in the subject. And so my way of coping was I had to find out everything I could about Bigfoots. I wanted to know what they were, who they were, what, everything I could know. And so I was reading on the forums and the websites and getting some of the background stories, the historical stories, like the Albert Ostman story. My favorite's the Cowman of Copalis Crossing, because Copalis Crossing is only about 30 miles that way. And then I saw that the BFRO had expeditions open to the public, and you could pay the fee, and you could go on the expedition, and you could get a lot of training and have a good time, meet a lot of nice people, and that really got me hooked. And some of those people I met on that first expedition are still like family to me. Got to meet Bob Gimlin, Mel Scahan from the Yakima tribe took me one-on-one out to the area east of where the main base camp was, and we spent the whole afternoon. And he taught me all the Native American take on it, their view of it, as well as what to look for out there. We even found a a really nice track line, and followed it each direction from where we ran across it. Followed it each direction for about 50 yards, and he taught me, well, here's one track. Now you got to look 50, 60 inches beyond it for the next track, because we tend to look at 30 inches like we're expecting a person to walk, but they have a much longer stride. So anyway, that was a good start. Good Bigfoot 101 crash course on that expedition. After that, started networking with a bunch of other people, and the other BFRO investigators noticed that, because we were including them on the networking. And so one of them asked me if I wanted to be an investigator, and I said, yeah, sure, what do I got to do? So I got set up with an account on the back side of the BFRO webpage. It's called Flats, and that's where all the reports come in, and then we go through those reports, and we pick them up and investigate them. Although there's not enough of us, so there are a lot that go uninvestigated, just simply because there's nobody, not enough people to do them. You get real enthusiastic at first and do a lot of reports, and then a lot of people, they lose interest, life gets in the way, kids come along, jobs change, people move away, and so they kind of drop out a little bit. But there's right now probably maybe not more than half a dozen of us in Washington who are actually active doing reports. Then I had another sighting. I was archery hunting with friends over by Mossy Rock, and we had climbed up to a ridge line, and there were 4 of us, and we had met up at the top, and we were going to drop down the ridge and down into the gully and go up the next one. And while we were standing there, I heard Bigfoot chatter down below us, and I thought, oh, they're there. So I mentioned to the guys, hey, there's Bigfoots down over there, and they give me the eye roll, and yeah, right, let's go hunting. And so we went down there, and there was a road down there, and so I'm walking the road, and I'm looking for one of my hunting partners, and he's coming up behind me. So I turn around and I look at him, and behind him I watched one jump from one tree to another tree. So that was sighting number 2. And so then after that, it was a couple of years, and we had BFRO expedition up in the North Olympics, and a really good spot. And we were driving out. We had been in camp for a few days, and we were going to go out to town and get some supplies. And driving out, a little juvenile, he was probably about 5 feet tall, runs across the road in front of us, and he had auburn reddish hair and long flowing wavy hair. It's not coarse or stiff. It's very wavy. A lot of you girls would like to have hair like their hair, but it ran across the road and out of sight in no time at all. And so we stopped right where it crossed and looked around. We couldn't find anything, but that was fun. And then drove out to town, came back, and we're coming back same day, and I'm getting ready to make the right turn from the logging road into the clearing where everybody was camped, and one walks right out in front of me. And I had my camera up. This shows you how hard it is to get a picture. I had the camera on, sitting on top of the steering wheel with my finger on the shutter release. It walks out, and before my finger could push the button, it had cleared the road. That's how fast they crossed the road. And that was a big one. He was just massively huge. Not only tall, but very thick. He was 200 yards down the road, so it would have made a pretty crappy picture. But anyway, other people on that expedition figured out that if they went out to that spot at 5:30 in the evening, set up their cameras, it would walk across the road. But it was always a blob squatch a long ways away is how it looked, even though it was only 200 yards away. That's still, pretty far to get anything clear. So that's, let's see, that's 1, 2, 3 of them. And then expedition the next year, same place, we took a group out on a night walk and walked out to the end of a road west of the main base camp, and there's a turnaround at that road, at the end of that road, and we all just sat down in little groups. There was 11 of us plus me, and so we just sat there. We said, well, okay, let's just see what happens. And one just comes walking unconcerned right down the slope, sticks popping, making lots of noise. He wasn't trying to be stealthy. It was like in your face. And he came down to within about 30 feet of us and stopped where a big maple tree was. And he's standing there looking at us. And we could see his eye glow, because by then it was pretty near dark. And then we heard another one coming from the, well, that one was the southwest of where we were. Then we heard another one coming up from the southeast, and he wasn't being stealthy either. So I'm going, cool, they're here, you know, this is what we came for. We're having fun, let's just see what they do. And so I went from little group to little group, ask them, you know, you okay? You understand what's happening? You know, they're right here, this is what we came for. Let's just see what happens. And I get down to the end, and the westmost couple was sitting down there, and they said, there's one coming up behind us too. So they had a third one coming in. So then I go back to the other end of the group where I'd been sitting, and this woman had 3 little kids with her. They were from, I don't know, 5 to about 12 years old. And she says, my kids are becoming frightened. Can we leave now? And I'm going like, oh, we came here for this, and now you guys want to leave? You know, that's what I'm thinking. And so, you know, recognizing, you know, the kids were afraid, and she was afraid too. I said, okay, well, I'll tell you what, I'll take you out, and whoever wants to go with me can go with me. And the rest of you stay here, and you watch and see what the Sasquatches do when we leave. And so, okay, we got a plan, and so we started walking down the road, and one of the young men who was with us, he was 14 at the time, he's all grown now, but he saw one crossing the road in front of us, and it belly crawled across the road, and he was, you know, we were all chatting and talking, and he couldn't get my attention to tell me, but we kept walking, and when we got up right to where it crossed the road, it was right next to me, and it got up. And it got up on all fours, and in the dark I could still see it, and it was something the mass of a cow getting up, and everybody started screaming. I kind of wheeled around with my walking stick like I was going to hit it, you know, purely a reflexive move. They're all screaming, I'm yelling, hey, you know, and he just went down the hill from us, and you know, he didn't do anything. He could have reached out and grabbed me and dragged me with him if he wanted to, but he didn't. They were having fun with us. It was kind of a game. And so anyway, we got everybody settled back down. You know, as soon as the screaming started, the radio popped on, and you know, people are questioning, you know, who's just been killed, who's been hurt, is everybody okay? We told them, you know, everything's fine, we just got a scare. And so I took them out, met a vehicle about halfway back, and they stayed with that vehicle. In the meantime, the other half of the group decided they were going to start walking out, and they were followed on both sides all the way out. And at one point, 2 of the gals started lagging behind everybody, and what they were doing is trying to isolate themselves so that they could get them to approach. And while they're messing around with a little digital audio recorder that was on a lanyard around one of them's neck, they were trying to get it to turn on. She heard something, and she asked the gal who was helping her in front of her, can you see that sneaking up behind us? And the gal just looked around her and said, yeah, he's about 5 feet away. And she went, okay, and they just continued on walking. They didn't turn around or anything. Enough radio chatter had gone on that one of the other members of the expedition that had been in a different place, he comes charging back to that area, and he had a Gen 3 night vision scope on a bracket in front of his just regular old video recorder. It's kind of old school, but it was all we had at the time. And he was going to hide in the bushes and see if he could catch it following us. And as soon as it got within about 100 yards of this guy, it just dropped off the side of the road. And it's like, yeah, they knew. Somehow they knew. So very exciting. So that was my next sighting. Had a bit of a dry spell on sightings and then about 2012, I think it was, I was driving to an expedition that was down by Mount Adams. And so we were driving down Forest Road 23, a few miles from Tackalack Lake, and we're making the road was making a right-hand turn, a sweeping right-hand turn. And as we made the turn, another vehicle was coming down the hill, and we passed on the curve. Well, as soon as we got out of the turn and onto the straightaway, there was a Sasquatch standing right alongside the road, getting ready to cross the road. And what we think probably happened was it waited till the vehicle that was coming down the hill passed and got out of sight, then it was going to cross. But because we passed each other on the curve, it couldn't differentiate my vehicle noise from the other vehicle noise. So it was ready to cross the road when we surprised it coming around the corner. If I'd had a dash camera, I would have got it. But I saw it. It immediately turned around quickly and stepped back into the woods. It was all black. But the interesting thing was the hair, again, was long, flowy, and shiny as it moved and turned. So then I got a dash camera, and wouldn't you know it, once I put a dash camera on, I didn't see another one for years and years and years and years. It's funny, it's how they seem to know. You've got some tech there, so we're not going to walk out in front of you. You know, it just feels like that. I don't know if they really know or not. It's probably just coincidence. But I kind of had to stop doing expeditions for a while because of my job. Had too many demands on me, and so when I retired, I decided I'd go back on a BFRO expedition. And so they had one up in the North Olympics at the headquarters site for the Olympic project. It was a collaboration, BFRO Olympic project. And so one of the young men brought there was a dad who brought two teenage boys with him, and one of them was a bagpipe player, and he brought those. And he would play those bagpipes in the evening before we would go out on our night walks. And it was very intriguing to the Sasquatches. It was a sound you just don't hear out there in the woods. So it seemed to bring them in. We were having activity from the very beginning. I took a group on a night walk on a trail, and we got to the end of the trail, made a switchback turn, went up the hill, and one of the other guys who had a really good military grade night or a thermal, he's motioning to me in the dark, you know, to come come down, you know, Scott, come down. And you got to understand, our night vision is totally fully formed. So even though he's like 50 yards away, I can see him. I can see him waving his arms. And so I go hot-footing it down there, and he says, there's a Sasquatch just down the hill on the trail. And I got my thermal out, and I'm looking at it. Mine's not near as good. Mine's a FLIR. His was a Pulsar or something like that. Anyway, he watched it walking upright, so he could see it full view. By the time I got there, it had dropped down into the spider crawl stance, right on the ground. And we got to watch it for a little bit, and then it disappeared, and it must have, you know, crawled away. Next day, we went back to the same spot, and we took the bagpipe player kid. He was, you know, he's about 19 years old and probably about 6'2", big kid. And we sent him down to where it was standing, and then we took, you know, comparison pictures and video. And whatever we saw was like 4 times bigger than him in mass. So then we noticed some people totally not associated with our group were riding horses on that same trail, and they rode by. And from the vantage point that we could see the Sasquatch at night through the thermals, all we could see from the horses was the very tops of their backs and the riders. So that gives you an idea how tall that thing had to have been for him to be able to see it walking down the trail, probably from about waist up. So I counted that one because we actually did get to see it. So then last July, we hosted a BFRO expedition, again down by Mount Adams. And the guy that spotted the one with the thermal up in the year previous, he brought a thermal drone. And he's retired Army, and grew up in the area around Trout Lake and Golden Dale and that whole area. He knew every nook and cranny of that place. Anyway, he brought his thermal drone, and the first day of the expedition, he's flying it around and figuring out how to really use it to good effect. You know, how to do it. And he spotted something big moving up towards camp from below, up a very, very steep slope, a 45-degree slope or so. So it was moving too fast to be a person, and it was too big to be a person. And the fact that it was coming towards camp probably meant that it was a Sasquatch, and not an elk or a bear or something like that, which would probably go the opposite direction. The next day, he was up running his drone, and he was following the people who were out doing night walks, and he flew over to a spot, and he saw 2 Sasquatch walk out of the woods and stop in a little clearing and stand there and look up at him. And that's when he pushed the button to record. It would have been great to get the video of them walking out. But it looked like an adult holding maybe a baby, and the way the hands were positioned, it would be the same as if you had an infant and you were holding an infant to your chest. That's how the hands were positioned. The juvenile was off to its right, and we could see in the thermal, we could see the hands move a little bit, so we knew it was a real thing. And so then the next day, I climbed up and I found that exact spot. And he flew his drone over while I was standing in the same spot and took video of me. And then we were able to take screenshots from both videos and orient them to match and do a comparison. The juvenile was bigger than me. I'm 5'5", and it was bigger than me. So, you know, that was our last one that we saw there. So. Good expedition. We're going to be going back to the same place this year. So we moved out here. We're completely surrounded by forest. To the west of us is a clear cut, and it's timber company land. You got to have a permit to go on their property. We got this place because we wanted to be in a place where there were Sasquatches around. And so we would put out food offerings, a little table with, you know, peanut butter and stuff on there. Nothing much touched anything. We'd put out glyphs and see if they changed it from one weekend to the next. Because at first, when we bought this place, we were only coming here on the weekends. It was like our weekend getaway. And nothing was touching anything hardly. And then we decided, well, we're going to plant some fruit trees. So we planted four fruit trees, 2 cherries and 2 apples. And as soon as we planted those, the very next weekend, we started getting activity around the glyphs, them changing things, adding stones, just letting us know that they recognized that we planted fruit trees, and they knew what fruit trees were. Then after we moved out here permanently, our granddaughter came to stay with us in 2021. And she had a bedroom in one corner of the house. Master bedroom's on the opposite corner of the house. And she would talk about hearing little girls talking outside her window, but she couldn't understand what they were saying. And we would find in the yard, like I would clear the yard so I could mow, and then next day or a couple of days after, I'd find a big rock in the yard that happened to just show up out of nowhere. And so I knew, you know, that's kind of the telltale signs that, you know, they're sneaking around at night and you know, playing around here. And then one night, one stood outside our bedroom window, maybe 20, 40 feet away, and did a full-on howl. And it was really loud, you know, and I immediately got a big grin because I recognized what it was. And granddaughter comes running into the bedroom. "What's that?" You know, I said, "Well, that's just a Sasquatch. Go back to sleep." And the dogs didn't make a peep. They just instinctively know what they are, and they know, stay quiet. So since then, it's been real subtle around here. We have a gifting station out a little ways from here. They haven't come and touched it. But when I take the dogs for a walk on the logging roads, you can find basically they're rock glyphs, rock arrangements that they put there. And they're real OCD about symmetry and about spacing. And so you can look around this sea of disorder of rocks and pebbles on these logging roads, and suddenly there'll be 4 of them lined up in a perfect straight line, perfectly spaced apart. And you go, okay, I note that. And there was one in particular that if you lined them up, they pointed right back at our house. So maybe they were marking that, hey, there's a house over there or something. Sometimes it would be an arrangement that was like, it looked like a flower. You know, it'd have a center rock, you know, it would have a bunch of rocks around it, but it was too purposeful to be just random rocks. We would find glyphs, sticks, you know, arranged, and they look like a Chinese character made out of sticks. Find those out there, and they'll be there for, you know, a week or 2, and then they just disappear. The rocks aren't even there. They're just, everything's gone. Hunting around here, I keep my eyes open for any signs that the Sasquatches are around, and you know, here and there you find stuff. Usually it's like a glyph alongside the road, or one place I found looked like they'd made a scarecrow. They took an alder pole about 5 feet long, and they drove it down in the ground, and then they tied another stick horizontal across it, and then they wrapped all of that in sword fern fronds, and it made it look like a scarecrow. But everything was tied together with sword fern, and it didn't have any telltale signs of a person being there. There wasn't any boot prints. All there was impressions of a barefoot print. One, you know, pretty good sized one, you know, I don't know, 16 inches long. Some small ones, so the little kid Bigfoots had been playing around it too. But no actual boot prints. So that was fun. So yeah, they're around here. They come and they go as they please. But you know, I would love to have one come over and you know, sit around the campfire with me. But who knows? Maybe someday. So one thing that Sasquatches do, if you catch them maybe by surprise or something, is they'll drop straight down to the ground. They'll drop down on their belly, and they'll freeze and they won't move. Another thing that they'll do is they'll just like slowly squat down, and they try not to make a quick movement because human eyes are attuned to fast movements. So by going slow, you might not notice them, and they just freeze. I know of a friend of mine who was, when he was a teenager, was elk hunting in the Blue Mountains, and he was watching a Sasquatch across a draw on the other side. Sasquatch didn't know he was there, but he was watching it through his rifle scope for about 45 minutes. And it was just foraging, you know, looking under rocks, finding things to eat. And some hunters started coming from the left side, following a game trail. And all it did was just simply squat down and freeze. And they walked within 20 feet of that Sasquatch and never saw it. So yeah, that's one of the things they do, and it's easy to miss them. And you know, they are so good at blending in. All they got to do is freeze. You just won't see them.